I'll be reading to you from Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming by Stephen LaBerge, Ph.D., and Howard Rheingold. We are actually on chapter 12. So if you've missed any of the previous chapters to this wonderful Dreamer's book, you can find them in our original playlist titled Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming. So thank you again for joining us today. Don't forget to smash that like, hit that big red button and the little bell so that you get all of our channel notifications. So let's just get started. Chapter 12. Life is a dream. Intimations of a wider world. I am standing quietly alone in a room when I become aware that I am dreaming. After enjoying a few soft somersaults in the air near the ceiling, I consider what to do next. Shall I fly somewhere? Visit someone? Then I recall my intention of seeking the meaning of life and decide to pursue this task. Realizing I would prefer to be outdoors, I leave the room and walk into the kitchen. My sister appears to be engaged in some activity near the sink. I pause to ask if she would like to go flying with me. She declines the invitation, saying she is about to fix a cup of tea. I tell her I will be right back and feel mischievous as I'm fully aware that I'm about to go off on an adventure. Outside, the evening is clear and quiet, the stars shining brightly. I float comfortably on my back, gazing up at the heavens. I notice the moon is not visible and assume it has already gone down. I'd like to see it though and figure that if I rise high enough, I should be able to. Immediately, I begin to ascend, still in the same position. When I come to some power lines, I hesitate and wonder how my body will react if I try to float through them. This concerns me only briefly as I say almost aloud, "Wait a minute, whose dream is this anyway?" This is no obstacle. Having expressed this, I find I am now either beyond them or they have disappeared and I am beginning to rise a bit faster. I decide at this point to visit the moon. I hold my hands out in front of me and fly upwards into the sky, moving more and more rapidly. Soon I sense a roundish shape appearing behind my hands. I lower my hands, expecting to see the moon. The shock of what I see is very dramatic and startling. It is not the moon at all, but quite clearly, it is the planet Earth. It is an exquisitely lovely vision, a gem glowing in soft greens and blues and swirling whites against the sable sky. Quickly, replacing the sense of shock is a feeling of great elation, and I jump up and down in space, clapping my hands and shouting joyfully. I've always wanted to be out here. I feel a thrilling rush and a sense of accomplishment. I became so excited that I have to remind myself to calm down again, fully aware that if I lose my balance, I will awaken. I shift my focus to my surroundings. I am floating in the midst of a vast, limitless darkness that is at the same time brilliant with countless stars and very much alive. This aliveness is somehow almost audible. I feel I'm hearing with my entire being, sensing the deafening silence as in a deep forest. This is an exquisitely wonderful place to be. Now I'm beginning to move away from the stars and earth, which becomes smaller and smaller until it disappears. Soon I am seeing entire solar systems and galaxies moving and spinning harmoniously, growing smaller and smaller as they too gradually fade into the distance. I hover in space, totally amazed. There is a profound sense of eternal energy everywhere. Again, I remember the experiment and decide to try a question. I feel rather uncertain of how to put it and wish I had given more thought to formulating the question. But the moment seems most auspicious and I don't want to miss the opportunity, so I ask, "What's the meaning of the universe?" This sounds too presumptuous, so I rephrase the question and ask, "May I know the meaning of the universe?" The answer comes in a wholly unexpected form. Something is emerging from the darkness. It looks like some kind of living molecular model or mathematical equation, an extremely complex three-dimensional network of fine lines glowing like neon lights. It's unfolding itself, multiplying, constantly changing, filling up the universe with increasingly complex structures and interrelationships. This growing movement is not erratic, but consistent and purposeful, rapid, but at the same time unhurried, determined. When it has expanded beyond me, continuing to multiply, I think of returning to the ordinary world. When almost back, I call out a very sincere thank you to the universe for this spectacular vision. I awake with wonder, excitement, and delight, as well as a renewed and deeply moving respect for the universe. The experience left me with a renewed feeling of awe and respect for the nature and splendor and creative energy force of the universe. It's as if I was seeing the invisible relationships connecting all things, the intimate molecular level superimposed over the vast and limitless universe. This was indeed a powerfully moving and impressive event. It also led me to believe that in some way I, too, am a unique and an essential part of whatever is going on here. The divine is within as well as without. PK, San Francisco, California. Knowing that I was dreaming, I found myself in an infinite void, no longer an I, but a we. This we was a sphere of pure light shining forth in the darkness. I was one of many centers of consciousness on the outer surface of the sun of being. We were an integrated collection of energy and consciousness, and though we could work independently of each other, it was as though we were one consciousness and worked in perfect harmony and balance. I did not have a body or spirit. We were just energy and all-knowing consciousness. All opposites were perfectly complemented and canceled out by each other. I believe there was a tone vibrating through the galaxy, but I can't remember it now. Later in the dream, we created a rectangle in the void, the door to life on Earth. We created nature scenes in it, and I moved forward into it and took a human form and experienced them. There were about 10 scenes in all the while my consciousness was not separate, and we all worked as one. Though there was separate nodes of consciousness, I was very lucid as this all went on. C.C. Whittier, California. Over a year ago, I was researching Eastern religions, especially Buddhism, Jainism, and Hinduism. During that time, I had a lucid dream in which I experienced what I believe is called the dance of Shiva. I dreamed of a weather-beaten Hindu statue. As I looked at it, my entire field of vision began to break down. The scene resembled snow in a bad TV reception. I wondered during the dream if perhaps my retina had come loose from the optic nerve. I then realized I was dreaming and that what I was perceiving was the primal energy underlying the universe. I felt deeply interconnected, at one with everything around me. I seemed to have rediscovered eternity. Either time had stopped, or I had stopped beyond the arch of time. T.D., Clarksville, Tennessee. The final phenomenon is the fullness of light. This light has appeared only while I dreamed lucidly, but it has not been brought about obviously by my own action. It has appeared while I was in darkness or in a significant room or while engaged in religious activity. It usually appears like the sun, moving down from above my head until all I see is a brilliant light. There remains no images. I become aware of the presence of God and feel spontaneous, great joy. As long as I direct my attention to the light, I gradually lose awareness of my dreamed body. To lose awareness of myself and my dream images in the evident presence of God is to experience transcendence of myself. This is the experience, whatever the explanation, fullness of light, awareness of God, gradual loss of awareness of myself, joy, often called bliss, and uncontrollable devotion are phenomena mentioned commonly in mystical literature. These experiences of mine have proceeded only out of the context of lucid dreaming. What endless questions vex the thought of whence and whither, when and how, wrote Sir Richard Burton in his Casida. Since thought began, reflective individuals have asked countless variations of this question. Why am I here? They have received as many answers as there has been questioners, but the answers have seldom been put in words. Likewise, when dreamworker Keelan added in her lucid dream, recounted above, "May I know the meaning of the universe?" she was answered with an infinitely complicated, living mathematical equation, impossibly beyond her capacity to comprehend intellectually. One might take this answer as equivalent to "no, you may not." However, the intellect may simply not be the proper organ with which to perceive the meaning of life. Peter Brent has described the problem in an article on Sufi teaching practices. We create what we become aware of, at least to some extent, by the sense we use to apprehend it. If you show a dog a book of philosophy, the dog will use its nose in order to decide what it is. It will have a series of categories: food, not food, dog, not dog, and so on. That will serve as its criteria for judging the sense that are its primary data. It will, as a result, very soon lose interest in the book. That will not be because of a defect in its sense of smell. It will be because ability, instinct, and experience force it to use the wrong sense for the task. In the same way, the manner in which we perceive the world may not be inadequate, given the senses we are employing. It may simply be irrelevant because we are employing the wrong senses. What is the proper sense with which to perceive the hidden meaning in life? Brent hints that it is a form of intuition, and that its cultivation requires the direction of a teacher who already has the capacity. This fact may limit how far lucid dreaming can take you without guidance. Nevertheless, lucid dreaming can give you a taste of the infinite, an intimation of a far wider world beyond the limits of ordinary reality. Whatever your views on spirituality and the nature of the self, you can use your lucid dreams to plumb the depths of your identity and explore the frontiers of your inner world. A vehicle for exploring reality. Tibetan teacher Tarthang Tulku had said, "Dreams are a reservoir of knowledge and experience, yet they are often overlooked as a vehicle for exploring reality." For more than 1,000 years, the Tibetan Buddhists have used lucid dreaming as a means of experiencing the illusory nature of personal reality and as one part of a set of practices said to lead to enlightenment and the discovery of the ultimate nature of the self. The Sufis may also use lucid dreaming or something like it for spiritual purposes. The famous 12th century Spanish Sufi Muhyiddin ibn al-Arabi reportedly recommended that a person must control his thoughts in a dream. The training of this alertness will produce great benefits for the individual. Everyone should apply himself to the attainment of this ability of such great value. Tartang Tulku explains the benefits of lucid dreaming as following. Experiences we gain from practices we do during our dream time can then be brought into our daytime experience. For example, we can learn to change the frightening images we see in our dreams into peaceful forms. Using the same process, we can transmute the negative emotions we feel during the daytime into increased awareness. Thus, we can use our dream experiences to develop a more flexible life. With continuing practice, Tulku continues, we see less and less different between less and less difference between the waking and the dream state. Our experiences in waking life become more vivid and varied, the result of a lighter and more refined awareness. This kind of awareness, based on dream practice, can help create an inner balance. Awareness nourishes the mind in a way that nurtures the whole living organism. Awareness illuminates previously unseen facets of the mind and lights the way for us to explore ever new dimensions of reality. According to the doctrine of the dream state, as an ancient Tibetan manual of lucid dream yoga, the practice of certain dream control techniques lead to the capacity to dream anything imaginable. Tolkul makes a similar claim. Advanced yogis are able to do just about anything in their dreams. They can become dragons or mythical birds, become larger or smaller, or disappear. Go back into childhood and relive experiences, or even fly through space. The wish fulfillment possibilities of this degree of dream control may seem compelling, but Tibetan dream yogis set their sights far above the pursuits of any trivial pleasures. For them, the lucid dream represents a vehicle for exploring reality, an opportunity to experiment with and realize the subjective nature of the dream state, and by extension, waking experience as well. They regard such a realization as bearing the profoundest possible significance. Realizing that our experience of reality is subjective rather than direct and true may have practical implications. According to Tolku, when we think of all of our experiences as being subjective and therefore like a dream, the concepts and self-identities which have boxed us in begin to fade and fall away. As our self-identity becomes less rigid, our problems become lighter. At the same time, a much deeper level of awareness develops. As a result, even the hardest things become enjoyable and easy. When you realize that everything is like a dream, you attain pure awareness. And the way to attain this awareness is to realize that all experiences is like a dream. A commentary on the doctrine of the dream state explains that long practice and much experience is necessary to understand dream yoga, but theory and experience is needed to complete the journey. Those who successfully follow the path of dream yoga to the end learn that, number one, dreams can be changed by will. Matter or form in its dimensional aspects, large or small, and its numerical aspects of plurality and unity, is entirely subject to one's will when the mental powers have been efficiently developed by yoga. As a result of diligent experimentation, the dream yogis learned that any dream can be transformed by willing it so. Most lucid dreamers will already know this by experience. Also recall from our discussion in Chapter 5 the powerful effect of expectation on dream content. Number 2, dreams are unstable. A step further, and he learns that form in the dream state and all the multitudinous content of dreams are merely playthings of the mind, and therefore as unstable as mirages. Experienced lucid dreamers also will have observed this for themselves. Dreams are as realistic but not as stable as waking perceptions. Number 3, waking state perception is as unreal dreams. A further step leads him to the knowledge that the essential nature of form and all things perceived by the senses in the waking state are as equally unreal as the reflexes in the dream state, both states alike being sangsaric, that is to say, illusory. At this stage, the yogi's knowledge is a matter of theory rather than experience. From Chapter 5, you should remember that the dream state and waking state both use the same perceptual process to arrive at mental representations of models of the world. These models, whether of the dream or physical world, are only models. As such, they are illusions, not the things that they are representing. just as the map is not the territory and the menu is not the meal. Number 4, the great realization, it's all a dream. The final step leads to the great realization that nothing within the samsara, phenomenal world of space and time, is or can be other than unreal like dreams. If we compare the mind to a television set, the great realization is understanding that nothing that appears on the screen can be anything other than an image or an illusion. Simply having the idea, for example, that the mind cannot contain anything but thoughts is not the great realization, which is a matter of experience, not of theory. In this light, the universal creation and every phenomenal thing therein are seen to be but the content of the supreme dream. The dream yogi directly experiences this new perspective on reality. Number 5, union. With the dawning of the divine wisdom, the microcosmic aspect of the macrocosm becomes fully awakened. The dewdrop slips back into the shining sea in nirvanic blissfulness, and at one moment possessed of all possessions, knower of all knowledge, creator of all creations, the one mind, reality itself. Here I take refuge with philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must remain silent. Plainly, this is not the sort of knowledge that is subject to public verification and scientific testing. However, this qualification is in no way intended to deny the possible value of mystical experiences, since there is no reason to believe that the limits of science are the limits of knowledge. Nor do we intend to imply that you should follow the ways of Tibetan yogis in seeking your own knowledge of divine wisdom. The methods and symbology of the Tibetan mystical schools were designed to function within the cultural context of Tibetan culture. If you are serious about pursuing your highest potential, we recommend that you find a guide or teacher who can speak to you in a language that you can understand. Self-knowledge. Nasruddin went into a bank to cash a check. The teller asked him if he could identify himself. "Yes, I can," Nasruddin replied, taking out a mirror with which he scrutinized his feature. "That's me, all right." Who we really are is not necessarily the same as who we believe ourselves to be. We are not who we think we are in our dreams, or indeed while awake. You can readily observe this fact for yourself in your next lucid dream. Ask yourself about the nature of each thing that you find in your lucid dream. For example, you may be sitting at a dream table with your feet on the dream floor, and yes, that's a dream shoe, and it is on a dream foot, part of a dream body, so this must be a dream me. All you need to do is to reflect on your situations in a lucid dream, and you see that the person you appear to be in the dream cannot be who you really are. It is only an image, a mental model of yourself, or to use the Freudian term, your ego. Seeing that the ego cannot be who you really are makes it easier to stop identifying with it. Once you no longer identify with your ego, you are freer to change it. Simply recognizing that the ego is a simplified model of the self gives you a more accurate model of the self and makes it more difficult for you to mistake the map for the territory. If you can see your ego objectively in its proper role as the representation and servant of the self, you won't need to struggle with your ego. You cannot get rid of it in any case, nor would it be desirable to do so. The ego is necessary for effective functioning in the world. The fact that both ego and self say I is a source of confusion and misidentification. The well-informed ego says, truly, I am what I know myself to be. The self says merely, I am. If I know that I am not my ego, I am detached enough to be objective about myself, as in the story in which a monk boasts to Nasruddin, I am so detached that I never think of myself, only of others. Nasruddin replies, well, I am so objective that I can look at myself as if I were another person, so I can afford to think of myself. The less we identify with who we think we are, the more likely we are to discover who we really are. In this regard, the Sufi master Tarakavi wrote, "When you have found yourself, you can have knowledge. Until then, you can only have opinions. Opinions are based on habits and what you conceive to be convenient. The study of the ways requires self-encounter along the way. You have not met yourself yet. The only advantage of meeting others in the meantime is that one of them may present you to yourself. Before you do that, you will possibly imagine that you have met yourself many times, but the truth but the truth is that when you do meet yourself, you come into a permanent endowment and bequest of knowledge that is like no other experience on earth. Before feeling the sincere desire to meet yourself, you may find the fulfillment of your ego wants and wishes far more compelling. This is natural, and it would probably be counterproductive and frustrating for you to try to pursue more sublime aspects of yourself when part of you is still crying for the satisfaction of drives and passions unsatiated in waking life. Likewise, you should not seek transcendence as a means of escapism. Remember Van Eden's demon dreams. You must first be willing to deal with whatever problems you may find on your personal level. But after having resolved any problems within the dream, and after a sufficient amount of wish fulfillment activity, you may feel the urge or need to seek possibilities beyond what you have known or conceived. You may seek to meet yourself. Surrender. I suddenly became lucid in a dream as I was walking in the hallway of my high school. I was very glad to be lucid and to be virtually as aware as in waking life. As usual, I wanted to get outside into the light. Walking down the hallway, I came to the exit, but my attempt to open the door was thwarted by the hulk of a wrecked truck. Realizing it was only a dream, I managed to get through the door enough to grasp the vehicle with both hands and heave it to the side almost without effort. Outside, the air was clean, the sky blue, the scene pastoral and brilliantly green. I ran through the grass and leaped into the air joyously, soaring through the treetops. I became entangled in the branches and had to hover while extricating myself. Finally, above the limbs, I continued my flight to a few 100 feet high. While flying, I thought, I've flown so many times before. Maybe I'll try a floating meditation in the sky. Having decided on the attempt, I asked for help from the higher, saying aloud, "Highest Father, Mother, help me to get the most out of this experience." I then rolled over backwards and ceased attempting to control my flight. Without fear of falling, immediately I began to float through the sky upside down, with my eyes closed. The sun beaming brilliantly down on me, filling my head with light. I felt like a feather floating lazily through the air. During about the 5 minutes of floating, I gently but firmly pushed thoughts out of my mind, as in my waking meditation practice. The less distracted I was by thoughts, the more intensely aware and genuinely joyous the experience became. What I can only describe as ecstasy. Gradually, I became aware of my body in bed, and as I awoke, I felt a lightness of well-being which is hard to describe. I enter a church, and I know I am expected to speak. The congregation is singing hymn 33 from a red hymnal. While they go through the usual preliminary exercises, I decide to go outside to gather myself. I am worried and afraid because I don't know what I will say. I sit down in the grass and suddenly come up with a topic which feels right. The way of surrender. At this point, I look up in the eastern sky and I see a large orb of white light many times the size of the moon. I realize that I'm dreaming. I yell out in joy, knowing it is coming for me. As soon as I do, the light withdraws into the sky as if it is awaiting a more appropriate response on my part. I know that I must turn my eyes away and trust. As I do, the light descends. As it approaches, a woman's voice says, "You've done well reflecting this light within yourself, but now it must be turned outward. The air becomes charged, and the ground is brilliantly lit. The top of my head begins to prickle and be warmed by the light. I awaken. To go beyond the ego's model of the world, the lucid dreamer must relinquish control of the dream, surrender to something beyond the ego. The concept of surrender is illustrated by the dreams above. Each of us probably has a different conception of this something beyond, the form of which depends on our upbringing, philosophy, or exposure to mystical ideas. A common theme expressed in religious terms is surrender to the will of God. However, if you don't like or don't understand religious terminology, you may wish to express your desire in a different manner. In the context of what we have been discussing here, the phrase could easily be, I surrender control to my true self. Whatever you assume about the nature of your true self, surrendering control from who you think you are to who you truly are will be an improvement because it includes everything you know, whether consciously or unconsciously. The true self is capable of making wiser decisions than your ego. Despite having surrendered ego control of the direction of your dream, you must maintain your lucidity. If you do not, your ego's drives and expectations are likely to regain command. Furthermore, lucidity can help you to respond creatively, intuitively to the flow of the dream, and to remember that there is no need to hold back from new experiences because of fear of the unknown. The highest is a particularly satisfying formulation for the transcendent goal. No assumptions need to be made about the highest, except that whatever is the it is the hierarchically speaking, prior to everything else, and also more valuable than anything else. The following two accounts provide some sense of what may happen when lucid dreamers seek the highest. In the first case, Scott Sparrow dreamed, I'm sitting in front of a small altar which has figurines upon it. At first I see an ox. I look away momentarily and then look back, only to find that there is a figure of a dragon in its place. I begin to realize that I am dreaming. I turn my head away and affirm that when I look back, I will see the highest form possible. I slowly turn back and open my eyes. On the altar is the figure of a man in meditation. A tremendous wave of emotion and energy overwhelms me. I jump up and run outdoors in exhilaration. Sparrow comments that this dream showed him what the highest was to him, after which it could be consciously established as an ideal to serve thereafter as a veritable measuring device by which the inner experiences can be evaluated. However, we need to remember that making an image into an idol that is a fixed idea or belief can inhibit further growth. Here is the second account, one of my most memorable and personally meaningful lucid dreams. Late one morning several years ago, I found myself driving in my sports car down a dream road, delighted by the vibrantly beautiful scenery and perfectly aware that I was dreaming. After driving a short distance further, I saw a very attractive hitchhiker on the side of the road just ahead. I hardly need to say that I felt strongly inclined to stop and pick her up. But I said to myself, I've had that dream before. How about something new? So I passed her by, resolving instead to seek the highest. As soon as I opened myself to guidance, my car took off into the air, flying rapidly upwards until it fell behind like the first stage of a rocket, and I continued to fly higher into the clouds. I passed across on a steeple top a Star of David and other religious symbols, and as I rose still higher beyond the clouds, I entered a space that seemed a limitless mystical realm, a vast emptiness that was overflowing with love, an unbounded space that felt somehow like home. My mood had lifted as high as I had flown, and I began to sing with ecstatic inspiration. The quality of my voice was truly amazing. It spanned the entire range from deepest bass to the highest soprano, and I felt as if I were embracing the entire cosmos in the resonance of my voice. This dream gave me vastly expanded sense of identity. I felt as if I had discovered another form of being to which my ordinary sense of self stood in relation as a drop of water to the sea. Of course, I have no way of evaluating how close this vision comes to the ultimate nature of reality, if there is any such thing, and I say this in spite of the conviction of certainty that came with the experience. As convincing as these experiences may be at the time, it is difficult to evaluate their ultimate validity. As George Gillespie had repeatedly emphasized, the fact that someone has a dream in which he experiences some transcendental reality, whether God, the void, nirvana, and so on, does not allow us to conclude that the dreamer actually experiences the transcendental reality. To assume otherwise would be like expecting that if you dream you have won the lottery, you will wake up rich overnight. Therefore, it is probably sensible to maintain a healthy reserve of judgment in your explorations. Remember, they are dreams, and as such can be easily represent delusion or truth. Neither believe nor disbelieve them, but keep their lessons in mind as showing you that there is more to life than you presently know. Psychologist Charles Tart has similarly recommended caution in interpreting the meaning of experiences. Knowledge or experience of the psychic, meditation, lucid and ordinary dreams, altered states, mystical experiences, psychedelics, all of these can open our minds to new understandings, take us beyond our ordinary limits. They can also temporarily create the most convincing, obviously true, excitingly true, ecstatically true delusions. That is when we most practice developing our discrimination. Otherwise, the too open mind can be worse than a closed but reasonably sane mind. Fariba Bagzarin conducted a study on what happens when people deliberately seek the divine in lucid dreams. Her inquiry focused on the effect that people's prior conceptions of divinity and their approach to seeking it had on their actual dreamed experience of God. Some people conceive of God as a personal divinity, a wise old man, Christ, or all-encompassing mother. Others see the divine as a force of the universe, of or some other intangible, non-personal power. Significantly, of the people in her study who succeeded in encountering an image of the highest in lucid dreams, more than 80% of those who believed in a personal divinity found God in their dreams represented as a person. Also, more than 80% of those who believed in an impersonal divinity experienced the divine as something other than a person. The way people approach seeking the divine also affects their experience. Bogzarin divided the subjects into two groups, those who actively sought God in their lucid dreams, and those who opened themselves up to whatever experience of the divine might come to them. The difference in approach was evident in the way the dream seekers phrased their intentions. Active seekers tended to say that they planned to seek the highest in their lucid dreams. Those who open themselves, surrendering to the divine will, as it were, express their intentions more as wishing to experience the divine, or to open themselves to the divine. The passive, surrendering group seemed to have less expectations about the appearance of God and experienced more unexpected outcomes than the active seeking group. The surrenderers usually encountered some representation of divinity without looking for it. The seekers also usually found God, often the one they expected to find. This study shows that our preconceptions have a powerful effect on the experiences of God, that we have in lucid dreams, at least when we are deliberately seeking such experiences. Does this mean that we do not really see God when we find divinity in lucid dreams? I don't think we can say. Divinity may have a different form for each individual, and our preconceptions may be simply the image we project upon the highest when we see it. However, Bhaskara's results suggested that we may have a more profound experience of the divine if we surrender control, if we don't try to force the experience by looking for God in the dream. Also, when seeking the divine, you should take care in phrasing your intention, because this directly affects how you will behave in your lucid dreams as you seek an experience of God. Exercise. Seeking the highest. Number 1, pick an affirmation or question that captures your highest aspiration. Think about what is ultimately most important to you. Formulate a phrase in the form of an affirmation or question that best captures your highest aspirations. Make sure it is a question you genuinely want answered, or an affirmation that you can make without reservations. Some possibilities might be, I seek God, or truth, the highest, the divine, the ultimate, mystery, etc. I want to meet my true self. Let me see the beginning of all. Who am I? I don't know my heart's desire. How can I find it? I have a duty to perform. What is it? Where did I come from? Why am I here? And where am I going? What is the most important thing for me to know or do now or next? Guide me to love and light. Let me remember my mission. Let me be awakened. Pick only one phrase at a time. Write down and memorize your affirmation or question. Number 2, remind yourself before going to sleep. At bedtime, remind yourself of your affirmation or question and your intention to ask or affirm the phrase in your next lucid dream. Number 3, in your lucid dream, make your affirmation or ask your question. Once in a lucid dream, repeatedly state your affirmation or ask your question while going along with the flow of the dream. Remember what the phrase means to you. Open yourself to guidance from a higher source. Strive to be sensitive to where the dream wants to take you, and go with it. Detach as much as you can from preconceptions about what should happen, and you will be able to accept what is given to you. Commentary. If you have trouble deciding what you want to seek, you may find it helpful to imagine that the angel of death has just come for you. More time, you plead. That's what everybody says. He replies, but in fact, you are allowed the traditional last wish. Most people waste it calling their priest or lawyer or smoking a cigarette, so be careful. What do you want to do with your final dream? Putting the question in the context certainly clears away the trivial, leaving what is of real importance to you. Humanity is asleep. In the 12th century, the great Afghan Sufi Hakim Sinai wrote that humanity is asleep, concerned only with what is useless, living in a wrong world. Nearly 1,000 years later, the situation is little altered. Humanity is still asleep. Some may find this hard to believe. You might suppose that if it were true, you ought to know it. However, if it were indeed true that while in the state we ordinarily call awake, we are virtually sleepwalking through life, it would be difficult for us to observe this fact directly. The one thing the sleepwalker doesn't see is that he is asleep. Similarly, as we walk down the road of life, we almost always assume we are awake. Sleeping, we think, is inaction. This is action, so this is waking. We don't think of ourselves as being asleep. But then neither does the sleepwalker or the non-lucid dreamer. Indeed, a Sufi aphorism puts the matter pointedly. O you who fear the difficulties of the road to annihilation, do not fear. It is so easy, this road, that it may be traveled sleeping. Sometimes lucid dreamers become acutely aware of their usual sleeping state, as in the following experience of J.H.M. Whiteman, a South African mathematician. After attending a concert by a celebrated string quartet, I remember going to bed with mind peacefully composed and full of quiet joy. The dream during the night that followed was, at the beginning, quite irrational, though perhaps more keenly followed than usual. I seemed to move smoothly through a region of space where presently a vivid sense of cold flowed in on me and held my attention with a strange interest. I believe that at that moment the dream became lucid, and then suddenly all that up to now had been wrapped in confusion instantly passed away, and a new space burst forth, in vivid presence and utter reality, with perception free and pinpointed as never before. The darkness itself seemed alive. The thought that was then borne in upon me was inescapable conviction was this: I have never been awake before. It's ordinarily very difficult to conceive how you might not yet be fully awake unless you've had experiences like lucid dreams. But if you have, you can understand by thinking through this analogy, as ordinary dreaming is to lucid dreaming, so the ordinary sleepwalking state is to what we would call the lucid waking or awakened waking state. I'm not saying that lucid dreaming is the same thing as enlightenment, only that a comparison of the two levels of awareness in dreams can show us how there might be a level of understanding of our waking lives far beyond our present one. Consider how muddled and confused most of us are when trying to comprehend the origin and purpose of our lives, and compare this confounded state of mind to that of the non-lucid dreamer trying to rationalize the bizarre events of the dream in the wrong terms. Our dream worlds make much more sense and offer many more possibilities when we realize we are dreaming. Thus, an analogous realization in our waking lives would lead to increased understanding of the context of our lives and greater access to our potential creativity. As I said above, I do not regard lucid dreaming as a complete path to enlightenment. Perhaps in the hands of the Tibetan Buddhists, with the right guidance and combined with other necessary techniques, seekers could use lucid dreaming to take them to their spiritual goals. However, I see it primarily as a signpost pointing to the possibilities of higher consciousness, a reminder that there is more to life than people are ordinarily aware of, and an inspiration to seek a guide who knows the way. Idries Shah has vividly described our situation in the following story: The Men and the Butterfly. Once upon a time, on a hot summer's day, two tired men who were on a very long journey came to a riverside, where they stopped to rest. Moments later, the younger man had fallen asleep, and as the other watched, his mouth fell open. Can you believe it when I tell you that a little creature, to all appearances a beautiful miniature butterfly, then flew out from between his lips? The insect swooped onto a small island in the river, where it alighted upon a flower and sucked nectar from its cup, and then it flew around the tiny domain, which must have seemed huge to an insect of that size, a number of times, as though enjoying the sunshine and the soft breeze. Soon it found another of its own kind, and the two danced in the air as if flirting with one another. The first butterfly settled again on a gently swaying twig, and after a moment or two it joined a mass of large and small insects of several kinds, which swarmed around the carcass of an animal lying in the lush green grass, and several minutes passed by. Idly, the wakeful traveler threw a small stone into the water near the little island, and the waves which this created splashed the butterfly. At first it was almost knocked over, but then, with difficulty, it shook the droplets from its wings and rose into the air. It flew with wings beating at top speed back towards the sleeper's mouth, but the other man now picked up a large leaf and held it in front of his companion's face to see what the little creature would do. The butterfly dashed itself into and against the obstruction again and again, as if in panic, while the sleeping man started to writhe and groan. The butterfly's tormentor dropped the leaf, and the creature darted quick as a flash into the open mouth. No sooner was it inside than the sleeper shuddered and sat up wide awake. He told his friend, "I have just had a most unpleasant experience, a dreadful nightmare. I dreamt that I was living in a pleasant and secure castle, but became restless and decided to explore the outside world. In my dream, I traveled by some magical means to a far country where all was joy and pleasure, and I drank deep, for instance, from a cup of ambrosia, as much as I wanted. I met and danced with a woman of matchless beauty, and I disported myself in endless summer. I played and feasted with many good companions, people of all kinds and conditions, natures, ages, complexions. There were some sparrows, but these only served to emphasize the pleasures of existence. This life went by for many years, and suddenly and without warning there was a catastrophe. Huge tidal waves swept over the land. I was drenched and very nearly drowned. I found myself hurtling back towards my castle as if on wings, but when I reached the entrance gate I could not get in. A huge green door had been put up by a giant evil spirit. I threw myself against it again and again, but it did not yield. Suddenly, as I felt that I was about to die, I remembered a magic word, which was reputed to dissolve enchantments. No sooner had I spoken it than the great green portal fell away, like a leaf in the wind, and I was able to enter my home again, and to live thenceforth in safety. But I was so frightened I woke up. Shaw comments, "Now it is said that you, as you may have guessed, are the butterfly. The island is the world. The things which you like and dislike are therefore seldom what you think they are. Even when your time arrives to go, or when you think about it, you only find distortions of the facts, which is why the question cannot ordinarily be understood. But beyond the butterfly is the sleeping man. Behind both of these is the true reality. Given the right opportunity, the butterfly can learn about these things, about where it comes from, about the nature of the sleeping man, and about what lies beyond these two."